Welcome. Over the next few weeks, all of you have been tasked with sharing stories about where God has met people in the Bible in untamed places. Let the chaos and campfire confessions begin as we meet God in the great outdoors. This is Into the Wild.
Many years ago, my wife Susan and I started reading books out loud together. We'd only been married for maybe a couple of years, and we went to the Wintergreen Ski Resort in the summer. Yes, the summer. I guess it's not a ski resort then, but anyway, back then, I don't know if they still do this, but back then you could pay a small fee, and you could ride the ski lift up the green and grassy ski slopes, which they weren't at the moment. And anyway, when you got to the top, you could grab a bite to eat if you wanted, or just enjoy the cooler, drier air at the summit and the great views, of course. And so we bought this book from an author that we had never heard of before, a guy named John Grisham. And we packed a picnic, and we packed a blanket, and we got up there and walked down a little bit, found some shade on the edge of the grass, and we read out loud for hours, taking turns, reading and listening. And we were super young then, that was a long time ago, but it began a tradition that we still do today. It's a way for us to enjoy some time together, a shared experience of this great adventure as authors take us on a journey through their written words. We do this every year, at least once a year. Particularly in the summer, we always get a book and we decide we're going to read that together. A few years ago, as we were planning some time away in this particular summer, we discovered a book called See You in 100 Years. If you've been around, I talked about this a few years ago, but this is the true story of the author. His name is Logan Ward, and he was a journalist, he was a writer, a professional writer, and his wife was a lawyer. His wife is Heather. And they're both living in New York at the time. This is like 2000, 2001. They had an only child at the time, a toddler named Luther. And like many of us, their lives were a blur, frantically managing all the demands of career and raising their kid and extended family, needs and marriage and all of that while living in one of the most crowded and loudest cities on earth. Logan realized that while they were making good salaries, they were making New York money, it was kind of money in, money out, because the cost of living in the Big Apple is also a premium. And while their days were filled to the brim with all this activity, he realized that their family was increasingly disconnected from each other. So he had an idea. And I love it. I love ideas. I love when brainstorming and thinking about possibilities. And so in this book, he's sharing about this idea, and he says, what if, when I get my team together, and like we're talking about like where we're headed or how we can fix this problem or how we can go to the next level, when I lean up and get a smile on my face and say, what if? I know my team's going, oh no, oh no. So he says, what if? What if we sell the pricey New York condo and we buy a farm in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia? Sounds like an attractive trade to many of us. Seems like a good trade to make, but it's not what you think. Logan's idea was not just to leave the city. His idea was to leave the era. He wanted, as closely as literally possible, he wanted to go back in time. And his idea was to take his family to 1900 and to live for an entire year, 4 seasons, exactly like people did 100 years ago. No electricity, no running water, no indoor bathroom, just an outhouse. So these two modern, lifelong city folk who had no idea about any of this would trade luxury for a time gone by. They had to research. He was a writer, did a lot of research. He knew how to do that part. So he had to figure out what is it we need to do. He took a year to plan this, and he realized in his planning that he had to buy a particular kind of farmhouse, a farmhouse with a root cellar, because he was going to have to learn to grow his own food, something he had never done before, and then he would have to store it so that they wouldn't starve to death over the winter. They had to have a root cellar. a place where they could store their canned food and it wouldn't get too hot in the summer and it wouldn't freeze in the winter. And he had to learn how to farm. Logan had to learn how to get rid of pests that would eat his food now and in the future without an insecticide, which is something you and I would just go out and do. He had to learn how to harness a horse to a carriage. He'd never owned a horse, never ridden a horse. They decided to park their car. If you live like you're living in 1900, you park your car in the barn and you don't drive it for a year. He purchased a hand pump for the well, disconnected the good one, went outside every morning, 4 a.m. before the sun came up, and he would hand pump 40 gallons of water, 3 pumps to a gallon. And he had to do that so that he could take the water in part, and Heather could begin cooking on a wood stove. Heather had to learn to make things from scratch, nothing in a box. They didn't have that then. They had to learn how to milk a goat. They disconnected their cell phones. They had to write old-fashioned letters to their family back home and then wait by the mailbox for a response in kind. And they had to learn to lean on neighbors, something they never had to do in New York, where you could literally live in a complex completely anonymously for the whole of your life. For an entire year, 4 seasons, they lived like it was 1900. Their extended family thought they had lost their minds. So Logan's book, which is one of the most entertaining and well-written books Susan and I have ever read, the only book we've actually read out loud twice. A few years later, after we read it the first time, we were thinking about, what are we going to read this summer? And we said, why don't we read that book again? It was just so good. The book documents their adventure, the trials and the struggles and the frustration and the learning along the way, and some super funny moments. So funny that Susan and I were laughing so hard we were crying. We couldn't read. You couldn't talk. It was that funny. And it ends, spoiler alert, the book ends. He's such a good writer. It ends so well. And he's reflecting. The experiment is coming to a close. And he makes this conclusion. He realizes that his family, even without all of the modern luxuries and even engaged deliberately in a life that was a lot harder every day, that his family was actually much closer than they had ever been before. And we're reading the end of it, and we're a little sad that it's coming to a close. And as we finished the book, Susan knew what I was thinking. And so she spoke before I had the chance. She said, no, we will not be turning the electricity off. No, we will not be buying a farm. No, we're not going to go back in time. She added a few other words to make sure I understood the extent of what she was saying, but the bottom line was no. There is something intriguing about the struggle to survive in the rugged wilderness. There's something inspiring for me about those who attack it and improvise and innovate and win. It's not unlike what happens many times in the Bible. It's a lot of what this series is about. In today, what we're going to look at, the people of God, sometimes called the Hebrews, they're called the Jews and the Israelites. They all go together. There's the same group of people. Well, they had been enslaved for 400 years by the Egyptians in Egypt. And God hears their cry, he finally intervenes, and through a series of miracles, he delivers them from their captivity. And the culmination of that deliverance is God parts the Red Sea. Maybe you've heard this story. And the Israelites walk through the sea on dry ground, a wall of water on one side and a wall of water on the other. But what we often miss is that as they're leaving Egypt, as they're moving through this miracle of the parted Red Sea, what is behind them, on the bank behind them, is the city. And in front of them on the other side is the wilderness. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim, and in the desert, so when they get to the other side, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out here into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. Scholars don't know exactly how many people Moses took with him when he left Egypt. We know for a fact that there were 603,550 fighting men. That's recorded in the Bible. But you have to add to that number the elderly and other men who might be injured or couldn't fight, and all of the women and children. And so most scholars agree that it's in the neighborhood of 2 million people. 2 million. This is not just a family outing. 2 million equals the total number of people in the greater Richmond area plus 25%. And what's incredibly telling is that these people who had previously justifiably, rightly cried out to God because they were severely oppressed, because they were slaves, they were beaten, they were stripped of their citizenship and robbed of their freedom and deprived of their dignity. Now, suddenly, they're nostalgic about Egypt back there. And they're that way because they say, at least the Egyptians fed us. If only we had died by the Lord's hand back in Egypt. In other words, we would have preferred that God kill us quickly while in slavery than kill us slowly by starvation in the wilderness. Now, on the one hand, I can at least appreciate the sentiment. I've made it no secret around here that my Achilles heel is food. I don't know if it's so much that I love to eat or just hate to be hungry, but either way, I'm always thinking about my next meal. I married someone who doesn't. She couldn't care less. A common conversation, I know you've heard this before, a common conversation in my home goes like this. It's 6 p.m. By 6 p.m., the food ought to be just about ready. By 6 p.m., I ought to have a fork in one hand. By 6 p.m., we ought to be pouring the tea, pulling a chair out, bowing our heads for a moment of pre-mouth-watering thanksgiving. Praise the Lord. But frequently at 6 p.m., Susan will say something like, "What do you want to do about dinner?" And I'm thinking, what? It's 6 o'clock. Everything we have is frozen. And I'm thinking, if we start thawing now, by the time the food is ready, I'll be dead. I am literally withering away here. Can't you tell? It's skin and bones. It's touch and go. Time is of the essence. I'll never make it. I know some of you people eat dinner at like 7:30. I don't really get it. I don't understand you at all. By 7:30, I'm having my after dinner snack. The first one. So I can at least empathize with the Jewish sentiment towards Moses. Anything is better than being out here, they say, in the wilderness, starving to death, even slavery. Now, I don't know if I'd go that far, but they really did. One more note that's important before we move on. Isn't it interesting that they blame Moses for their circumstances? They blame Moses. But Moses is just following God. He's just trusting God. He's just believing that God had something in store for his people, something better than slavery, certainly better than starvation. But the people, they apparently just don't realize that. And I guess they thought that blaming God and yelling at God was probably a bad idea, so they target the next best thing. They target their leader, Moses. Back there in Egypt, we sat around pots of meat and we ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. It's almost absurd, isn't it? I mean, you and I can look at this from our perspective and we can objectively see how unreasonable it is to attack Moses for this situation. It's not his fault. He didn't create it. He just did what God told him to do. It's just silly. Except you and I, we're also capable of being silly and irrational. In fact, if we're being honest, we often want someone to blame for our own discomfort and our own pain and our own disappointment. It's just easier to point the finger than it is to look in the mirror, isn't it? I was in a meeting with some of my closest colleagues, people that I work closely with and count them all as friends. This is 2 or 3 months ago, and we were away on this retreat. We were wrestling with strategy for the church and direction and where we're headed and what do we see God doing and what do we see God moving us towards. And normally these conversations, they're exhilarating for me, exciting, full of energy. But for some reason, the farther we went into this 2-day retreat, the more anxious I became, until at one point I got really amped up and I lashed out at a friend. Now, I like to minimize it and say, on the one hand, I didn't cuss, I didn't throw anything, I didn't get violent or anything like that. On the other hand, what I did do was use some harsh words, and words are my thing, and I know how to weaponize them, and I used them to hurt a friend. I blamed this person because it was easy. It was the path of least resistance. And as soon as it happened, I knew that what I did was not right. I knew that it was hurtful. And I immediately felt ashamed and I felt embarrassed. So a few days later, after apologizing to my friend and receiving forgiveness graciously, I gathered that whole team together and I said these words to them. I said, I like to think that I've killed that old Brian who used to be inside of me, but the truth is, obviously, he's still there. And while I'm far more healthy today than I used to be, it's obvious that I still have some work to do. And I just wanted to say to all of you that I am sorry. I apologize for how I behaved. And I received forgiveness from my friend and forgiveness from all of them. Here's the thing. We're all capable of targeting someone with blame for our own shortcomings. Maybe you're less susceptible to it, but you're capable too. If there's one thing I'm glad about, it's that I can usually see my own darkness and I can usually quickly address it with honesty and with remorse and then go to work on addressing the real problem, which is almost always me. But the people around Moses, they had no appetite for that. They had an appetite for food, not self-reflection. And in this case, for whatever reason, God decides to appease them. The Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites, so tell them at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. And then you will know that I am the Lord your God. That evening, quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp, and when the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost fell on the ground and appeared on the desert floor. And when the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, what is this? Because they didn't know what it was. And Moses said to them, it is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. Talk about a heavenly meal. I mean, God literally whips up this divine delight and rains down food on his hungry people. Quail in the evening, bread in the morning. I mean, it's not Mexican, but it is sustenance. So they had complained about being hungry. They saw no way to feed this 2 million strong horde with the scarce resources of the desert. And so God shows them again how powerful he is by creating something out of nothing, which is kind of God's specialty, in case you don't know. Protein and bread, as much as they needed. They didn't have to work for it. They didn't have to plow, milk, hunt, trap, plant, or grow it. Just grab and go. Heaven's fast food, chicken and bread, like the precursor to Chick-fil-A, happening right here in the Bible. There were a couple of stipulations, though. The first one went like this. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some little. The ones who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone gathered just as much as they needed. And then Moses said to them, this is the key, no one is to keep any of it until morning. Just what you need just for today. This is a critically important condition. is preparing the Israelites for an important lesson. God did not want them to gather or save more than they needed for that day. And this is the lesson of security. And the essence of this question, the essence of security, is who or what do you trust? Who or what do you trust? This entire exercise where God tells his people to only gather what they need, there's a lot more than that on the ground, but you're only allowed to get what you need. The prohibition on keeping any extra overnight, it's God's way of teaching them that their security would not be found in storage or savings or inventory, but in God's ability alone. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a bit convicted here. In fact, this is one of life's struggles for me. I grew up in a modest family, which is a very polite way of saying poor. We didn't have a lot. And I was surrounded by kids as I was growing up who did. And so if that's you, you'll kind of know what this is like. I was kind of determined that as I moved into older teenage years and approached adulthood, I was determined I was going to hustle. I would work hard. I would earn my credentials. I would take some risks, and I would do better. And I did, actually. In addition to church work, which is almost never lucrative, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Seriously, I wouldn't have it any other way. Along the way, I also started a couple of businesses. One of them found a niche and had some reasonable success. And it's had its blessings, that's for sure. But for the follower of Jesus, success like that also has some risk. It's the temptation to redirect security from trust in God to trust in the accumulation of your nest egg. Security born of a 401k. Security rooted in the future of real estate value. Security founded on the stability of the U.S. economy, whatever that means. And I started to feel the fear of the possibility of losing what I do have instead of the freedom found in trusting God for what I don't. More specifically, fear of losing the things that I want instead of trusting God for all that I need. I've not completely conquered this tension, by the way, but I'm talking about it more these days. I'm praying that God would lead me to a place of putting my whole security in Him and nowhere else. And this is the hard part. The prayer is easy to pray. The hard part is asking God to do whatever is necessary to make that prayer a reality in my soul. That's scary. Whatever was necessary for the Jewish people was quail in the evening, bread in the morning, and none of it kept or stored overnight. No savings, no rainy day fund, no go bag in a safe. And listen, I'm not swearing off rainy day funds and savings and your retirement account. I don't think it's good stewardship to not have some of that. I'm just saying we've got to find, it's clear that we have to find our ultimate security in trusting God for what we need. That's where it's at. That's what this story is about. It's what it's about for the people of God. And it's why God tells them not to save any, not to store any, not to keep any. Because God was not just going to do this for one day. This wasn't like a one-off miracle. God was going to do this every single day. Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions each day, as in every day, no exceptions. How long is this going to go on? Just one more verse. The Israelites ate manna 40 years. 40 years. Until they came to the land that was settled, they ate manna until they reached the border of Canaan, until they got to the promised land. 4 decades of bread and quail. Really? When I read the Bible, I want to get inside of it. I don't just want to blow through it. I want to can I try to feel what they feel? Can I experience this for a minute? And you and I, sometimes we read the Bible and we miss all kinds of stuff. So just sit with this for a minute. I want you to imagine your favorite food, like your favorite food. I think I could eat steak every day for 40 years, but it's not true. Or pancakes, or mashed potatoes, the real kind, not the flake in a box variety, or even Krispy Kremes. But the truth is, I'm sorry to say, it would get old. I don't care how much you love it now, at some point you would loathe it. You'd say something like, again? We're having ice cream and brownies again? But this wasn't Bluebell, it wasn't Aunt Jemima, it wasn't a juicy filet, it was bread and chicken. What's for dinner? Bread and chicken. How about lunch? Bread and chicken. Breakfast? You guessed it, bread and chicken. Every day, no exceptions, for 40 years. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Surely, with 2 million people, there had to be some creative types. Some people who, if it said finally, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to mix things up. Let's put a little salsa in it and make it exciting. We thought maybe we would help imagine that with you together. Take a look. Welcome and shalom, foodies. We're glad you came back to Holy Bites today, where we turn ancient meals into modern masterpieces. Today's culinary challenge, manifesting miracles. Reimagining the classic desert duo manna and quail straight out of Exodus and onto our plates. So let's see what the first chef has whipped up for us. Welcome, Chef Mo.
Thank you for having me.
So glad that you're here. What have you done to be creative with manna?
Well, first off, this is just pure manna bread that I made, so I call it mo manna, mo manna, mo manna. And it's got some essence of quail. No sides, nothing else.
No, how about spices?
Nope, no spices. It's essence of quail.
So it's just manna. What exactly is essence of quail, by the way?
Well, with the ingredients being mixed, I found 2 rocks out in the pasture behind the house that quail usually sit and bathe upon. So I took those 2 rocks and I ground all the ingredients together and I made the masterpiece.
So it's basically gravel with essence of quail.
And once you've had this, you're going to turn the tassel and graduating to a new taste experience.
Wow, that's...
And might I add,
kiss the
you're
cook.
going to want to kiss the cook.
Okay, I'll take your word for that. This is utterly uninspiring, but
Manly
hey,
fist bump.
Thank you so much. Okay, and our next chef, Chef Jacques. Sorry. What have you created for us today?
I present to you le ragout du qui mastique avec un nous du manna.
Translation?
Oh, it's mystical quail stew.
Oh,
Yeah. It's inspired
okay.
by the wandering in the desert and the hunger. And of course, the biblical indigestion.
Oh, okay. Is this manna right here?
Those are oyster crackers.
So you just went out and bought some oyster crackers.
This is the masterpiece.
Okay, and what is in this?
The oyster crackers
Go into the.
complement the snail.
I don't suppose you want me to taste this?
Yes.
It's got snails like escargot.
Oui. Yes. Those are the tears I wept while seasoning it.
Weeping while swallowing it. Okay, well, thank you so much. I'll come back to that. Okay, and our final chef, Chef Zipporah, what have you made for us today?
I proudly present to you quail hot dogs, grilled to smoky perfection, nestled inside homemade manna buns.
Did you say quail, yeah?
Yeah, like one word, like say it with me.
Okay,
Quail,
yeah. Okay, all right,
That's
okay.
good.
And so this is quail sausage
Yes.
in homemade manna
Manna
buns.
buns.
Okay,
Yes.
and I noticed this is creative because the Israelites had manna and quail, but you figured if there's quail, there must be quail eggs.
Yeah.
So you got those from real quail.
Yeah, authentic quail eggs. Look at this.
They look like real quail eggs. Let me just clarify this. So you found some actual quail nests and got the eggs.
Absolutely.
Okay, because what I found was this little package of Manchester Farms fresh quail eggs. They were just laying, not far from here, and
That doesn't belong to
it's
me.
somebody else because it looks the same. Okay, well, it looks amazing. I mean, it really does. After I tasted Chef Zach's stuff, I've lost my appetite, but it looks very good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you decided to join us today. From stone ground manna to hot dog holiness, these chefs have truly taken us on a journey through the wilderness and straight into Flavor Town. So join us next week when we try to part the chocolate fountain with a breadstick. Until then, stay blessed and keep it delicious on Holy Bites today. So, this is what happens when you take the creative team away for a couple of days. And so perhaps it, wasn't quite like that. But the truth is that this whole lesson that God is trying to teach these people and us through time and the pages of the Bible is about security. We've discussed that. But it's also about provision. As in, who would provide for the needs of God's people? Well, of course, the lesson is that God would. And how often would he provide for them? Every day. And here's the trick question. For how long? Not 40 years, but the whole of their lives. Jesus' own words is a wink to this very story in the Bible when Jesus, in his most famous prayer, taught us how to pray and looked toward heaven and said to God, "Give us this day our daily bread." God's providence did not end in 40 years. The lesson ended, but his provision for them, it remained. It continued. And it continues for us still today. God provides for his people sustenance every day. The food that we eat, which is part of why we give thanks for it, the air in our lungs, the possibilities for our future. None of that has changed. You and I, we delude ourselves when we give in to the influence of this long-standing idea that most of us were born into, that I can make my own way, that I can rely on myself, that I can accomplish anything I put my mind to. And those are noble ideas. And they promote good things like hard work and overcoming obstacles and perseverance and creativity. But in the last analysis, my needs are not ultimately met by my ingenuity or hard work. They are met by God's providence and his alone. And not just for this life, but for the one ahead of us too. Right here, this is a morsel of our existence. Eternity is where we go when this short, brief stint here is over. And Jesus provided the avenue for both of those eras of our lives to be exceptional. And so we thought that today, since we're appreciating God's providence and our security in him, that we would remember the ultimate way that God did both for us through the sacrifice of Jesus on our behalf. In case you don't know, Jesus provided us a way to reconnect with God after our sin made a mess of that relationship. Jesus offered himself through his brutal torture and death to pay the price that I owed and that you owe. Death is the cost of sin. Separation from God is the ultimate penalty for that sin. But Jesus took care of both through his voluntary substitution of himself in my place. And because of all of that, I can now have a direct relationship with God. In the story of the manna and the quail, there's this thing that happens in Exodus 16 that will link us to the moment we're about to have. It goes like this. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so that they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the wilderness when I brought you out of Egypt." And so Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it, and then place it before the Lord to be kept for generations to come." See, what they did when the lesson was over, They created a way to remember for generations how God provided for his people, how he offered them security. Manna in a jar. Thank you. Jesus gives us a similar way to remember how God provided for us and how he still does, and how God offers us security today. The symbol Jesus gave us is bread and wine. Representing the bread, his broken body, the wine, his spilled blood. And so today we thought, let's remember and celebrate both security and provision as we remember how God did that for you and for me. The Apostle Paul writes about this, saying, the Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke the bread and said, this is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. So what we're going to do now is we're going to invite you. I'm going to pray for us in just a second. And we're going to invite you to remember God's security and provision for us in this way, through the celebration of communion, which Jesus gave us as a way to remember. There will be 4 stations around this room. If you're online, you've already received instructions about this. And after I pray, I'm inviting you to come to one of the tables, the table that's nearest you, to take the bread and then the juice at the table. And there's a trash can at each table for the cup when you're done. And here's the thing. I'm asking you to return to your seat, and we're going to celebrate this moment together. Don't use this as an opportunity to go. We just have a little bit more to do. It's not much. And then we'll be on our way. So let me ask you to pray with me right now. God, thank you for providing for us, for reminding us that you are the ultimate source of our security. And we ask for forgiveness today for the moments when we forget and when we take it for granted, or when we elevate our own ability above your own. Help us today to place our complete and total security in you and recognize that you're the one that provides for our needs. We're grateful, Lord Jesus, for what you did for us, for the sacrifice you made so that we can be in relationship with you now and forevermore. We remember that today through the power of your sacrifice and resurrection. Amen.
Flowers in all of their beauty. I don't have to wonder, you know what you're doing. So why would I worry at all? You're faithful to supply everything I need, everything I need. My Father has it, my Father has it. Every single time the Lord will provide. My Father has it, my Father has it. Sparrow, lacking for nothing, no fear of tomorrow, first the kingdom and its treasures, everything else it will be added. All that I'm needing, oh, I know the Lord will provide. Oh, I know my God's not empty-handed. He gives us blessing upon blessings, all that I needed. Oh, I know the Lord will provide. We're gonna seek you. Seek first the kingdom and its treasures, and everything else it will be added. Oh, I know the Lord will provide. Oh, I know my God's not empty-handed. He gives us blessing upon blessing. I'm still believing. Oh, I know the Lord will provide. Yeah. Oh, everything I need, everything I need, I know my Father has it. My Father has it. And every single time the Lord will provide. My Father has it. Oh, everything I need, my Father has it. My Father has it. And every single time the Lord will provide. My Father has it. My Father, seek first the kingdom and its treasures, and everything else it will be added. 'Cause all that I'm needing is enough, and I know the Lord will provide. Yeah, and I know my God's not empty-handed. He's giving us blessings upon the blessings. I'm still believing. I know the Lord will provide. Oh, I know the Lord will provide. I know the Lord will provide. That's what we're standing on. The Lord will provide. He provided for the Israelites in the desert. He provided a way for us, every single one of us, to live forever with Him. And He will provide what we need in the future, so you can go forward with confidence that God will provide for you. We hope that we get to see you here back next week as we continue this series. We invite you to bring a friend. We'll see you then.